So let's jump straight in. First one is a big one. Everyone loves to talk about this. It's always discussed at the water cooler. You know, React Native has terrible performance, blah blah blah, something like that. But my warning is nothing's black and white. There's context is the most important, and like it depends on what app you're building. And a big factor is your people as well. Like if you have a bunch of mobile devs and you say, let's build React Native, that doesn't go too well and could really put your startup in trouble, I think, if you lose a lot of native devs. So yeah, that's a list of some of the popular ones. I don't know if I've missed any. I'm just gonna like go through them, give my thoughts on it. Obviously, I have a certain experience, could be totally different. I haven't even touched really React Native. I've done some tutorials or Xamarin, so I don't know much about them. Yep. But I mean, yeah, no one likes it, but a lot of good apps are built with it still. So yeah, it serves its purpose. If you have a bunch of web developers in your company and you need to build an app quick, it seems like a pretty obvious choice if they're all like React developers already. So yeah, like I said, it depends on the context of your people and what they want to do. You got to keep the developers happy, I think. Flutter, I did an art group a little. I liked it. I think out of all of these cross-platform options, I think it's probably the easiest to get started. Like it's a really good one for new devs to get into because it gives you a lot of guide rails, and IDE has a lot of support and help. It's honestly easier than building an Android app with a native code. Yeah, you agree, Kelvin? Yeah. You've done a lot, I know. Yeah.
How about jumping from Flutter? Like, what would be like? I guess my question is like, if you're a new developer, like you jump in Flutter and then go to Kotlin.
Yeah,
it's a big jump, right?
No, I wouldn't say it's a big jump. It's the same as any language. Actually, Dart and Kotlin, not too crazily different, I don't think.
Kotlin's a much better language.
Yeah.
Objectively speaking, it's a much better language than Dart. That's not bad, but let's
start the discussion.
Yeah.
I think I love Kotlin, but I do Flutter primarily because
I was gonna say I knew we'd get into discussions quickly, so I might try to race through all this and then we can leave it to the end.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I knew it would happen. So, yeah. Roman started it. So Kotlin multi-platform, we did a bit of that at Redeye. It worked out pretty well. It's not for beginners. It's probably the most difficult out of these to set up because it's very experimental and like your CI/CD pipelines takes a lot of effort to make not completely slow with it and that kind of thing.
Just going into production now.
Yeah, it went to beta last week or something. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But I like it. It's been good. I remember Kelvin did a talk on that at Redeye, and then we actually did a bit of a Redeye 2 years later or something. Only for analytics, so nothing super important, but the proof of concept worked quite well. It's pretty cool.
I did that talk on Kotlin multi-platform and then immediately started doing Flutter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Web views. Don't forget about web views. I'm gonna give you a few screenshots in a second, and you'll have to guess what they are. A lot of apps have web views. Like if you don't have a web view in your like medium-sized app, you probably should have for your about page or your legal page or something like that. A mobile web page, don't always jump to the conclusion that you need an app. I'd like to do a little poll here. Who has the Amazon shopping app installed? About 1/3, maybe half, and who just uses the web page? So about half, like.
I deleted the app because it was.
Yeah, right.
It freezes weirdly.
So web page is good enough a lot of time, but yeah, some people like an app. Xamarin, haven't touched. I think it's very similar to React Native, the way it works. It controls your native components, etc. But again, I think it would be good in a situation where like you're a Microsoft.NET dev house and you need to build like an in-house app or some small app or something. Unity has an interesting point. If I had used Unity for my first app I ever built, it might have been released, but I tried to do a lot of animations in Android and that was a complete waste of time, performance nightmares, and I remember like the first time I pressed run on the animation, and it was like super choppy. I was like, what? I thought phones were supposed to be powerful, but yeah, anyway. Should have used Unity, it might have actually launched.
But for games or where?
Games, it's used for other things like engineering, 3D apps, that kind of thing as well. So here's a couple screenshots, and the game is to guess what the framework or cross-platform tech was for you. Does anyone have this app? Anyone recognize it? It's the beer app, Untapped, for searching beers, ranking beers, discussing beers. It's not bad, pretty smooth. I didn't even notice it was cross-platform until I looked it up. Any guesses?
It's hard to tell, right?
I mean, you probably need to play with it. Yeah. Anyway, it's Ionic. So it's one of those pretty rare ones now, pretty old tech. It's still going pretty strong. It has around like 5% market share overall. I think overall cross-platform has around 30% of developer market share, which doesn't really mean app release market share, but yeah, overall Ionic has a bit of a chunk of that. Yeah, it's a good app. I don't know how the developer experience is. I did do one quarter of an app a while ago, and I released it, got it to work. We got the money for it, so it can work. This is one we did at Redeye recently. We just released 2.0 of our markup tool. This was an interesting one because this was a case where we ripped out the native code because it was terrible and replaced it with a cross-platform solution, which was way better. Any ideas what it is?
React Native.
No?
Is Angular? No, sorry, Kotlin?
No, it's a web view. So the
What?
toolbar is native, but the canvas behind there is a web view. And I think that's actually how a lot of these drawing apps kind of do it, like OneNote and everything. I think they probably use web views. So the reason we went for that, we researched all the options, but the main reason was there was a brilliant library available in JavaScript, and we also needed to support it on web, and we needed to do it in SVG to support it on web. So it's like, why don't we just do it on a web canvas? Yeah, the library is Fabric.js, and it's really nice. We honestly didn't code that much. We released this in like 3 months of coding or something, so with 4 devs. So yeah, it was a really good experience. Yeah, we used, and the other thing about web views is it probably mobile devs probably turned their noses up more when they had to use JavaScript, but now TypeScript has come along and it's a whole lot better, and I actually quite enjoyed it.
Can I just ask, is the web view like actually loading a URL in the background, or do you bundle?
No, it uses like the fake server thing, so it loads the file from the phone's
so you bundle
storage. Yeah,
cool.
So yeah, we tried to lock it down so there was no network connection at all from the web view for security and stuff. This is the other app at Redeye. So it has a 3D view that you can like rotate around, look in, and like add your issues in different places. That one's also, just get straight to the point, it was also a web view. The web team wrapped up the Three.js inside a Forge viewer Autodesk thing, and they just provided it to us as a kind of a module bundle with like events coming in and out of it. And yeah, it was really easy for us to integrate. So that was very similar to how we did the canvas thing as well. So.
How was the performance in terms of interacting with 3D models? Because you can zoom and pan on that, right?
Yeah. On the simulator, it was terrible, but on a real device, it was really totally acceptable, even for these like pretty massive models. I don't think it was any like really that much faster on a desktop. Like, yeah, it was pretty similar between
across Android and iOS as well.
iOS, I think, was probably a bit faster in general because they handle JavaScript a bit better.
Yeah.
But on Android, it was fine as well. We added it. Yeah. All right. Probably I'm only about like 1/10 of the way through. I need to speed up. Unit tests versus UI tests. I'll just quickly go through this. I was thinking about it, and testing provides 3 benefits. The one you most often think about is it protects against regressions after your code is complete. And that's why everyone puts it in the CI/CD system, so it runs the test and checks that you haven't broken anything. The other thing that you mightn't be thinking about as much is it forces you to spend more time inspecting your code for bugs. So while you're testing it, you mightn't realize that you fixed the bug because you were just like looking at it for longer. I think there's actually research behind that, that's one of the main benefits of testing is just the amount of time you spend looking at it rather than actually running the test. And the other thing, like, I don't know, I don't love writing tests. Some people do. I prefer to be writing cool application code. But the cool part for me is the faster development iteration. Once you've got it all set up and everything, it's quite nice to be able to like press play, walk away, get a coffee, and you don't have to sit there navigating through the app, clicking the things, adding a new task, deleting it, and getting to the state that you want to actually test, because your test can have all that done.
Challenge that last point, but it's not going to talk.
Yeah. This is a graphic from the Android developer docs that was quite famous for a while. They've actually removed it and replaced it with something even more confusing. So what they recommend is do lots of unit tests, some integration tests, and UI tests. I don't really agree with that. That may be why they've removed it. I think it really depends on the situation. I've seen a lot of unit tests that are just there to add code coverage and test a method call calls another method call kind of thing. So yeah, don't add that to the pile at the bottom. I wouldn't recommend bothering to do that. I would recommend more to do integration tests. So yeah, if you have some crazy SQL, definitely test that because it's very easy to get that wrong. So that would mean you have to create a mock database in memory or test it on a simulator with Roboelectric or XC test or something. And in our like the last year at Redeye, we kind of noticed that setting up unit tests on like presenters and like view models was taking almost more time than it was to set up a UI test for the same thing. And the UI test gives you more benefit because it's a higher level overview of things. You can refactor underneath it without causing so many breakages of your tests. So yeah, I'm a big fan of UI tests. I honestly haven't probably been in like a company where we have a full suite of the whole app and it keeps being flaky and breaks all the time. That's what everyone complains about, but I haven't run into that yet because we haven't had that many UI tests set up to run into that.
Can I ask, at Redeye, did you guys do just full native testing suite for Android and iOS, or did you use some sort of cross-platform testing framework?
Native. Yeah, we researched, like the QA team was researching Appium and stuff, and we were like, so much effort to use that, and there's bad documentation on it stuff. And we're like, we could probably teach you to use the native ones and it would be better experience. So yeah, we just use Espresso and XC UI test. There was something else I was going to say about this, but I
Normally labs like a huge suite of like Appium cross-platform tests.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Just so hard because like if the apps were slightly different between platforms, then a cross-platform test doesn't work.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, I could see that being really painful.
horrible.
Yeah. So my experience was only when developers were writing the tests. It wasn't really handed off to the QA team. Anyway, I can't remember. Obviously, we're running out of time, so I went trying to remember what it was I was going to say. Third-party dependency, write it yourself. I think this one's a pretty easy one. Is basically ask yourself the question: would you rather use an app that was released yesterday or one that was in production for 10 years and had 10 years of bug fixes? Use the open source because it's had lots of production testing in other apps that you don't have to pay the cost for. There's also a question of use first party or third party. probably prefer the first party. I think that's pretty obvious because it has probably more guaranteed long-term support. But there's lots of situations where not many people use Google's Volley. They all use OKHTTP because it's just way better and way more supported. Well, I don't know about supported, but just more common. Everyone knows it. Merge versus rebase. This one's a good one as well. So I'll jump to the first slide. One of the reasons people talk about rebasing's advantages is it gives you a nice linear history, so you can see when you're sort of searching through your Git history to see what happened and when it was added, you get something like this, which is nice to look at and maybe nice to search and everything. But this is actually from code I was using this week. And the problem with that is, I don't think anyone probably really recommends doing like rebasing your whole release month's work onto your main branch. I don't know, maybe people do. So for example, I was looking at this function here and like, oh, when did they add that? Let me get the info from the git blame and have a look at it. And then this happens and it's impossible to find any trace of the history of why some code was changed or anything, because everything's lumped together because it was rebased, squashed, yeah, squashed
That's
in.
a different issue.
That is true, yeah,
Squashing
that's squash. Basically, that's probably more the squash issue. So my recommendation is to merge in public, especially if you're, not an expert team. I think it's easier. There's a lot of, so definitely rebase, do whatever you want for your own stuff. And it probably helps because you don't want like undo this, fix this kind of comments. You want like real informative comments. But then, if you're adding a feature branch into the develop, for example, I would prefer merge, but we'll probably get into that later.
So hard to stay quiet.
Yeah, trunk-based development. There's option C, don't do feature branches, don't do merging at all. There's actually a fair bit of solid research behind it to say that it's more effective, etc. It sounds scary. I've never tried it really in anger. We were kind of moving a little bit towards it at Redeye, where we were trusting people to just commit direct if it had a unit test, and you can always review it. Well, you should review it at some stage, but it doesn't need to be before it's merged. Like, I think that's a golden rule everyone sticks to, but maybe it's not so important. As long as it's reviewed at some stage before it's released, you can merge it whenever, and you get the benefit of earlier integration.
Depends on how experimental it is.
Yeah,
Range.
I wouldn't merge experimental stuff. I guess you can hide it behind feature flags. I've never really tried that. Honestly, I haven't really tried this, but a lot of people say, well, there's a lot of DevOps reports or something that say it's effective.
Is that with hotfixes and everything like that, though, if you're using Git-File, if you go really straight into the tray?
You just commit the hotfixes, trunk. I don't know.
Tray, yeah.
Sorry.
Back onto the tray.
Yeah.
All your development changes in there, they're going to be released. Anyway.
Yeah, not sure about that. Yeah, like I said, I haven't really done it, but I've heard
That
of
really feels like a big it depends.
Yeah. Function versus object oriented. Like what we were discussing it with the other devs at Redeye, like why not both take features from both? One thing I do, one little trick about this, sorry, I missed one note there. I think Kotlin and Swift are really some of the best languages. So I think we're lucky as mobile devs because they have great functional and object-oriented features. One little trick, I think it's a bit of a hangover from Java, this is real code that I was looking at this week. I see this quite a lot. people add a function here inside the class, but it doesn't need to be inside the class. So the advantage of just moving it outside at the bottom of the file is it's still associated with the file, still private, but you can immediately look at that and say, this isn't changing any of the class's state. It just gives you like a bit of peace of mind, easier to read. You just know that this is what's coming in, that's what's going out. It's not affecting anything else. So it gives you a little bit more control.
Global state.
Yeah. Quick one, MVVM versus MVI. I don't really know. I haven't really tried MVI. Google devs, like Google, what do you call engineers, are arguing about this at the moment on Twitter, and some people like MVI and MVVM. The main complaint about MVVM, I think, is the name. Like it really should be view model and then data or something. Like it just doesn't make any sense to be, it's around backwards. And yeah, anyway. I think MVP and MVC maybe are still all right. I think MVP's advantage is it's simpler because you don't have to use reactive constructs like the observable pattern. So that's a slight advantage there, but yeah, I've mostly used MVVM. But all of these obviously are trying to split the view code from the logic behind the view code. Which has worked great. I think it's improved because you don't fill all your logic with boilerplate intermixed and it gets very confusing. I do wonder if it's possible with SwiftUI and Compose now that we could maybe start accepting more logic in the view. I've heard some, recommendations from Google engineers along those lines. I think that's coming from the React world where a component often has a bit of logic in it. So this is an example where it's making an API call in the code for a simple view. Is it really that bad? You can still see what's going on. How much time do I have, Enki? Probably running out. Okay, plenty. I think I'm near the end. One thing I keep harping on about, anyone that I've worked with will be annoyed by this because I keep saying it every code review. Can anyone say what they don't like about this piece of code? So imagine this is sorry, if you're not an Android developer, this is the view. And say you've just landed on this page and you want to greet the user. So you're telling the view model, which is supposed to hold the logic, to greet the user. So what I don't like about it is that this is giving the view the responsibility of telling the view model what to do, and the view is supposed to be super dumb. So what I would prefer is, I'll just skip ahead, is this. So just the view receives a user. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. And it gives it to the view model and says, I was created with this. So the view is being super dumb. It doesn't really say anything. It's only changing the naming, but I think it's like helpful because then this turns into a more accurate function. Otherwise you would say greet user, and then sometimes you're greeting it, sometimes you're not, kind of thing.
Pass the events directly as opposed to pass event to logic. So you give the event
Yeah.
straight to the view model.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
you
that's
decide what to do with the event.
exactly, yeah. So don't do any modification to the event or any logic on the event. Don't rename the event. Just say, this is what happened to me. And then the logic part, which is the view model, decides what to do with it. Yeah. Offline first was online only. This isn't really a controversial one. It's just something I threw in because we did a lot of offline work at Redeye. And my warning is, be careful about your product manager saying, oh, just make it offline, make it work offline, because that explodes the complexity by 5 to 10 times of the app. And our app, this is just an example from some Apple framework. So there's a core data database. Our app probably looked worse than this. And these are all like relationships, what do you call it? One-to-one, one-to-many relationships that we have to maintain, and we have to sync that to the server. Obviously, if you used a like if you're doing something like this, and if we were doing this again, I would highly recommend to get something off the shelf like Realm Sync or CouchDB or one of the other ones, other syncing ones, CouchDB, Couchbase, something like that. All right, last one, iOS and Android. I've done a bit of both. I spent about a year and a half doing iOS development, and then the rest was Android. iOS, I'd say, has a sleeker OS. That's just the win I'm giving them. But Android is more fun to develop for because it's open source. That's what I can say. What's that?
Xcode sucks.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. At least it's fast. Android IDE bogs down unless you got a super powerful one. But yeah, I mean, yeah, IntelliJ shortcuts, yeah, just kill it. Yeah, and I work for Adherium. We're actually hiring an Android dev at the moment, so come and join us if you want. We make cool sensors. I've got one over there, which sync asthma puffers to your phone to track your by Bluetooth. Yeah. Yeah, asthma puffer wrappers. They have a Bluetooth sensor, and then that syncs to the phone. It tracks your usage. It even tracks flow rate and things like that, which is pretty nuts.
That's sick.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, there's probably a lot to talk about now.
Bring the knives.
Yeah.
Can we just like break that up into a bunch of different, grab all of those topics and have the next set of meetups as like discussion groups around those topics? We like split up into groups and let the flame wars begin.
I'll let you go back to this one, Kelvin, if you want. Yeah, I think you had something to say.
I have to say at every point.
Yeah.
I really like what you're saying. I don't like squash. I won't use squash at all because it's just gets rid of your history, right? Like,
Yeah.
I really want to be able to read through the history, and yours would be, like I'm pretty opinionated about this at Eggy as well. Like I want to be able to sit back and actually read the history.
Yeah.
And so the problem with squash is you lose your history. The problem with merge is your history is really hard to read because you don't know, because you've got branches everywhere and what's been merged into what, and you don't know what decisions that the merge has made.
Maybe my complaint is more about squash, to be honest. Yeah, but I was associating that with rebase, like changing history, etc. Do you use terminal or do you use a GUI?
GUI.
Yeah, okay.
And I try and force everybody to use a GUI.
Yeah, me
most people
too.
aren't that good at Git in the terminal.
Yeah, I hate
Me included.
terminal in general. So
And like the JetBrains Git integration is incredible.
It is.
Yeah.
Being able to actually look at the Git history and scroll through it and be able to read it.
Yeah.
And the conflict resolution is the best by far. I know VS Code has made some improvements lately, but yeah, nothing beats it.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can definitely discuss that more. I'm not a Git expert, but you obviously just saw the screenshots that pissed me off. But they were probably more to do with squash than rebase. Yeah. Any other questions?